Surrey County Council. There are a few housekeeping issues which I'll just deal with. So we're not expecting any fire alarms, any drills. So if there is one, would you please exit this room and work your way back to where you came from, the main reception, and then out into the car park at the front, and somebody will guide you from there. In terms of social media, I'm very happy that you use social media, whatever form, provided that it doesn't interfere with the business of the meeting, please. Could I ask all members and all members of the public to put your telephones, mobile phones, to silent? Or remember to do that, please. Then, for members of the public that will be speaking, the sound system here is not that good, so could you please sort of make sure you speak into the microphone, and there's a button, a blue button. If you push that, then that will light up the microphone. Later on in the meeting, I'll give you an update on where the organisation is. There's a paper called Organisation Strategy, and that starts to set out some of the issues and projects that will be progressing over the next few years, in fact. But it also looks at some of the achievements to date. So it's an important document because it continues to guide us through our work plan and indeed our ambition to improve outcomes for our residents. There are three key papers that we will look at. The first is in relation to extra care sites. Extra care or supported living is accommodation for those that have some sort of social care support need, and these are our first three sites where we will be progressing the building of that accommodation. The second is around recycling and the confirmation that we will retain all of the recycling centres across the county and some other things that Mike Goodman will talk us through. And then the third one is the funding of a Surrey-wide flood alleviation scheme. And we'll talk in some detail about the previous impacts of flooding and indeed how this scheme, which is a significant scheme for this council, how that will hopefully help improve and protect our residents. So I think those are three important things. That this is about using residents' money or your council tax that you pay to invest in projects that will truly benefit those residents. And I think I would just add to that this is possible. This council has moved forward considerably over the last couple of years in terms of its financial resilience. Significant efficiencies have been driven out right across the council that has enabled us to get to a sustainable position, even against the ever-increasing demand for our services, particularly in social care and for children with special education needs and disabilities. But by that clear focus and that drive of those efficiencies, we have started to be able to take some choices in terms of areas in which we are now in a position to invest. So we have a long way to go. There's no question about that. I wouldn't overstate the position. But I do feel that we are definitely moving in the right direction, and I hope that when I present a budget statement next month's Cabinet, we'll start to see some genuine progress in delivering some capital projects and capital investments across the county, again, for things that matter to our residents. So we'll start with item 1 then on the agenda, which is apologies for absence. There's one apology from Councillor Mel Few. Don't think there are any others. Item 2 is minutes of the previous meeting held on 24th September 2018. Those have been circulated. Any Any comments, any inaccuracies? No, those agreed. Thank you very much. Item 3, declarations of interest. Any members have any interest to declare? No, thank you. Item 4 then, we move on to member questions. And I think the first question is from Dr. Povey, Andrew Povey. Andrew, if you want to ask any supplementary questions.
Thank you, Leader, and can I thank the Cabinet Member for the answer to the question. 2 supplementaries, if I may. It says that in the response, it says the design for the relocated school has taken into account the issues around travelling to and from the school site. And given that the access to the proposed site is on a 90-degree bend, and that the plans that you have shown show that the parking lay-bys outside of the existing school would be removed, and that the whole road has parking restrictions on it, could the Cabinet Member tell me how the design takes into account the issues around travelling to and from the school? The other question was around the forecasts for the primary numbers, which we were given as showing no increase at recent local committee. Could I actually have the numbers?
Okay, I will take the second of those first, Dr. Povey. The exact numbers I don't have here with me, but the school place planning team will have those. We've indicated in the response that the reception places are near capacity. They're above capacity potentially for next year and persistently above that from 22-23. And the forecast reception numbers are only slightly above, but the biggest impact seemingly will be from those new homes that are coming forward for year groups 1 to 6. So I will have to provide specifics around that, and I'll make note on that for a follow-up. We've had a number of consultations and invitations to stakeholders and all interested parties to look at the designs, and of course that will include the travel plan to school. The Safer School travel team will be involved in that, and the intention is to take this to Planning and Regulatory Committee in December. So I think if there are further observations that you wish to put into that, we would ask for those to come forward. I can't speak to the lay-bys and the parking restrictions at this stage, I'm afraid.
Thank you very much. You had another question, Dr. Wavy, but that's being dealt with under part 2. So the third question then, second question on your papers, is from Mrs. Watson. Okay, perfect. Thank you very much. And in that case, the last question is from Jonathan Essex.
Thank you. Your reply begins by stating that universal youth work provided by Surrey County Council has not changed in the last 18 months. Well, seeing as I know that that sentence is factually incorrect, because in Red Hill there was universal youth work provided on a Friday night up until July last year, and that is no longer the case. May I request that I seek a private meeting with you to discuss the content of the rest of the answer to the question, please?
Thank you. Well, as you know, Jonathan, you're welcome to come and meet me any time. And once a month, in addition to open access meetings, Julie Ars and I have a drop-in session for all members. You're very welcome to come at any time. We've never stopped anyone coming to speak to us about anything. Look forward to that. In terms of the answer to the question, the universal youth offer, in terms of the number of hours and what we provide, there have been no changes to the staffing whatsoever. That's what it means. We haven't reduced the number of staff, we haven't reduced the spend on our youth workers who are working in an open access environment. Now, what I understand you're talking about specifically, and I know you come from an authority that do a lot of really good work in terms of having your community development workers in Preston, Merston, Red Hill, Woodhatch and Hawley from Reigate and Banstead. I know that there's a lot of things have been going on which they've been involved in, and maybe some partnership has been involved in that as well. So I'm not saying that the youth workers haven't necessarily been deployed slightly differently from how they were in the past when they worked with your youth development officers, but there's been no reduction in spend. Now, what I understand that both you and Natalie Bramall did was to provide some equipment for the annex at Redhill, and I think that's the building that you're talking about, is it, in your follow-up question? Are you talking about the annex at Redhill? Yeah. Exactly, thank you. So I went back to the members' community allocations to see what had been provided from your allocation. I saw that you each gave £2,000. And from the understanding the service had, this was from some equipment to be used in the annex at Redhill pending the opening of the youth centre, the Phoenix, in Tadworth. And well, apparently that's what was understood by the community partnership team. So anyway, the work that was going on there was pending the opening of the Phoenix Centre, from the feedback I've received from the community partnership team. And that was when the new youth centre was built. The expectation was that there would be less at that specific building that you're mentioning in the borough. But we can look into this in more detail. These are the questions that I've just looked into on your behalf because I knew you were concerned about the annex. I'm happy to follow up in more detail with you about that particular provision. But what I can reiterate from the answer that you've received, that we have had no reduction in our spend on that part of our service. The £600,000 a year is there in our budget for those particular kind of youth workers. But what we have changed is that we have introduced 2 new targeted services, which is the targeted youth support and the adolescent safeguarding service, and those are now up and running as part of the restructure in children. So there's more targeted youth work, but we still have retained our universal team. And as you know, the leaders made the offer that where we've got youth centre buildings that are owned by the county council, the voluntary community faith sector are offered those buildings if they want to deliver open access youth work in them. Obviously, we'd have particular agreements for each one with voluntary sector organisations, but we will still have our £600,000 a year worth of universal youth support that can be used to come in and maybe support the initiation of a particular activity in an area, or to go and do something where a need has arisen that wasn't foreseen before. So there's been no reduction of staff across the 18 months that you're talking about, and that's what it means when it says there's been no change. There's been no change in the amount being spent on the universal service, people that work in the universal service. There have been other changes in, as it says here, in the targeted teams.
Thank you very much, and I'm grateful if you can provide in writing the idea that we loaned equipment to Redhill before it went off somewhere else, because that wasn't on the basis that we were making our membership allocations.
Well, we'll make sure that we know what happened to that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. That's the end of the members' questions. We now move on to questions from the public, of which there are 4. The first 2, one is from Mr. Jonathan Rayner and the second from Mrs. Heather Rayner. Would you both like to, if you want to ask any supplementary questions, use the microphones? Thank you. Just push the blue button there, that's it.
Good afternoon. My question is, why was the sequential and exception test, which favours the relocation of the Cranley Primary School to Glebelands Fields, not done at the outset of this proposal in 2011, 8 years ago, and before the Council incurred the costs of 3 detailed applications, surveys and flood studies? And why did the sequential and exception test not include the 60 nursery places?
Mrs. Isles.
I would have to go back to the business and the properties team about the sequential and exception tests. The nursery places are factored into this report as we have it here, so I'm not quite sure I understand the detail on that, but if you'd like to follow up with me with written details of what you're asking, I will make sure that we come back to you on that, Mrs. Rainey.
Good afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I've not seen any of the financial data, so I think it's very difficult to comment, and to have a response to my question that the project is financially viable is obviously something that is very difficult to take as correct or incorrect without seeing the figures. I'm sure the Surrey County Council, when they built their new offices in Guildford and went several million over budget, probably thought it was financially viable at the beginning. My question is, how much money has already been spent on all the plans and all the studies before this meeting to date? And how much is the contingency allowance to mitigate the potential identified risks in all the reports?
Thank you, Mr. Rainey. We do have a contingency amount in there in what we call the Part 2 papers, which contain the financial detail that you're seeking, and I can't disclose at this point. We have assessed the financial viability of it and believe that this is the only way to deliver the project. I will see if I can pick up on how much has been spent to date as requested, but I can't promise that reply without taking advice on it.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you both very much. The third question was from Catherine Higgins, who I believe isn't attending, and there's been no supplementary question. And the fourth from John Oliver, who I can't see in the audience, and again, no supplementary question. Thank you. We'll then move on to item 4C, petitions. There have been no petitions received. 4D, representations received on reports to be considered in private. There have been no representations. Item 5, reports from select committees or local committees. There are none. Item 6, then, Deputy Leader, Cabinet Member, Strategic Investment Board decisions taken since last Cabinet meeting. There is one, again, which was Julie Isles. Is there anything you wanted to add to that?
Yes, I'd just like to add to the decision that I took on the 1st of October about issuing the statutory consultation on proposed changes to the admission arrangements. This was looking at community and voluntary controlled schools in 2021. There is a technicality which has come out of this year's admissions, so we are updating and reissuing our consultation for 2021. It will include some faith schools in the assessment of the nearest school from 2021, so that parents will then have the opportunity to comment if they do not feel that these schools should be included as the nearest school, and Cabinet can then fully consider that in the January decision.
Okay, thank you very much. The second is the minutes of the Committee in Common. The Committee in Common is a joint committee together between Surrey County Council and Surrey Heartlands, who deliver our National Health Service things. So the meeting was held on the 25th of September 2019, and there's nothing further to add to those minutes. So item 7 then is a substantive item in relation to the relocation of Cranley Primary School.
Yes, thank you, Leader. So we've had some questions around this item. It's the business case for the rebuilding of Cranley Church of England Primary School in the grounds of the adjacent Gleebland Secondary School. Cranley C of E Primary was formed from the merger of Cranley Infant School, which is sited on Church Lane, with St Nicholas Church of England Junior School sited on Parsonage Road. The school continues to operate as a whole across both of these sites, and that brings challenges in terms of the staffing and the resources. In addition, the existing buildings are in very poor condition and they require extensive maintenance and repair. There is also an independent nursery provider, Acorn Nursery School, which operates in the grounds of the school, and there's a specialist centre for children with communication and interaction difficulties. We have for some time been looking at ways to bring the school onto one site, with much improved accommodation and with the provision for future increase in places, and that's in line with the future residential development. This new building will include sufficient capacity to expand the school by one form of entry, so it goes from 330 places, one at infant and two form entry at junior, into 540 places, which will give us two at infant and three form entry at junior, and 60 nursery places, which importantly include the free educational entitlement for 2-year-olds. A 3G football pitch will also be installed at Cleveland School, and that will be for use by the pupils and the community. The project is expected to be delivered in 2021. It has previously been considered at Cabinet in May of 2015 and March of 2017, and that was in order to report on developments. This has been going on for quite some time. There's a funding bid to the Department of Education Priority Schools Building Programme 2, and that has been successful. It is to replace the reception year building on the infant site, but subject to approval from the Department of Education, we anticipate that this funding will be redirected into the rebuild project. The two existing school sites are then to be released for residential development, as you'll be aware from the questions that have been raised by Dr. Povey. And further details are included in part 2 of this report, which we will get to later. The planning application for the relocated school is expected before the December meeting of the Planning and Regs Committee, a change from October which was referenced on page 10 of the report. It includes a detailed, comprehensive school travel plan. We've had representations from governors and the leadership teams of the two schools which have been addressed, and the local plan team, Waverley Borough Council, the local sports and social clubs have all been engaged in meetings. And I mentioned the open consultation events as part of the pre-planning application process. So all interested stakeholders have been invited, including local members and members of the public. I'm therefore asking Cabinet to approve the recommendation on page 9 of the reports pack that, subject to agreement of the detailed financial information for the rebuilding of the school as set out in part 2, the business case for the rebuilding of the school be approved.
Thank you. Are there any other members that wish to? Mrs. Lewis.
Thank you. Well, Julie's delivered this in a very business-like way, which is exactly as you'd expect at a Cabinet meeting. But I think this is really exciting. Julie mentioned that this has gone on for a long time, and I remember going to visit the junior school, which I think other Cabinet members have done as well, and being quite shocked by the state of the building. And I feel it's really good news for children in Cranley that there's going to be a new primary school, and that it's located conveniently with the secondary school, which is helpful for families. And just think it's a really good news story. So thank you very much for bringing that forward, because it has taken a while, and under your watch it's come to the Cabinet. That's great. Thank you.
Sinead.
Thank you, Chair. If I could just add to that as well, I also fully support this paper and feel this is an exciting piece of news as well. And I think it links in with our next paper that we're going to be looking at, which is in regards to extra care. What this paper lends towards, and the extra care paper as well, is that there is a strong sense of delivery here within Surrey County Council, and therefore in support of your report.
Okay, thank you very much. There's one recommendation. Just before we vote on that, can I just point out for the members of the public that the 3 Deputy Cabinet members, Alison Griffiths, Natalie Bramhall and Mark Newty, under our Constitution, I'm afraid, do not have a vote, so they will not raise their hands, which I'm sure they would have done otherwise, when we come to vote. So the recommendation is, as Julie Isles has already read out. If you agree with that, can you please raise your hand? Agreed. Thank you very much. So we will then move on to item 8, which is concerning the 3 extra care sites. Sinead Mooney.
Thank you, Leader. This paper here links to the paper I presented in July 2019 at the Cabinet meeting. And that previous paper set out the ambition to build 725 affordable units of extra care housing in Surrey by 2028. Developing extra care is vitally important for our vulnerable residents across the county. It offers more support than sheltered housing, but still allows people to live independently. Residents in extra care will live in a self-contained flat with their own front door key, and it is intended staff will be available for up to 24 hours per day to provide personal care and support services. These will be tailored to meet the residents' needs and can include help with washing, dressing, toileting and taking medications, for example. Domestic help, such as shopping and laundry, and meals may also be provided. This paper identifies the first tranche of sites that are owned by the Council and have been identified for development. These are the former Brockhurst Care Home in Ottershaw, the former Pinehurst Resource Centre in Camberley, and the former Pond Meadow School in Guildford. Between these three schemes, they could yield up to 165 affordable units, delivering up to 23% of the Council's strategic ambition for extra care housing developments. And it is anticipated that we could have a spade in the ground within the next 18 months. If I could please draw Cabinet members' attention to the fact that it is intended that the sites in Ottershaw and Camberley will be developed through the Council's joint venture partner Places for People, and the Pond Meadow site will be put out to tender. This decision is based on the need to show the open market the Surrey County Council is interested in going out to tender to see what options are available to us. And it's also based on feedback from a recent soft market testing exercise which indicated a capital receipt could be returned for the Guildford site. The Council will not be the landlord of these schemes. The collection of rents and service charges and ongoing maintenance will be contracted through our procured housing provider. A separate procurement process will be conducted for the on-site care provider, and Cabinet approval will be sought via the relevant annual procurement forward plan. Surrey County Council will explore the suitability of other sites owned by the Council and explore further options with the market in order to deliver our overall extra care and supported living ambitions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Julie Arles.
I just really wanted to draw out the links from the safeguarding responsibilities at paragraph 34 and the public health implications at 36 in the way that that speaks to our overarching council strategy and the objectives of the Health and Wellbeing Board. Thank you.
Dr. Grant Duff.
Thank you, Leader. I think this is very good news for our residents who wish for independent living with care and support. 165 affordable units is certainly a good number, and it sets the journey for the future. The 3 properties have already been targeted, and this is work to be continued. I particularly welcome in paragraph 18 the decision to seek to identify individuals that will be suitable for extra care housing, starting from a year before construction has been completed, and welcome the stated ambition to work with them, their families, friends and carers to prepare them. I think it's terribly important that we're very sensitive to personal needs and we're very sensitive to personal circumstances. So I think this report sets out a comprehensive piece of work, and I very much welcome it. Thank you.
Mrs. Lewis.
Thank you. People that have been attending these Cabinet meetings for a while will know that I'm a great fan of Atul Gawande, and particularly his book On Being Mortal, which formed the basis of the Reith Lectures. And in that he stresses the importance of your final years of life being really alive and for you to be able to live in the way that you choose to live. So the most exciting part of the presentation today for me was when Sinead said everyone would have their own front door key. and having that a bit of independence and knowing that you can carry on living as your own life as an individual rather than being put into a residential care home where everything is standardised and your identity is taken away from you to some extent. I know they have their role. For some people it becomes really vital, so I'm not in any way trying to criticise what they do. But for most people, for as long as possible, it's important that you do have your own front door key and that you live life as you choose. And I think this is why this is such a good thing for the Council to be doing. So thank you.
And I too am delighted that and not that I'm known for my impatience, but I'm very pleased that we've now got to this point where we've got the first three sites underway, and hopefully your spade in the ground will be there sooner rather than later. So I think it's a really good initiative, and for all the reasons everybody else has said, I think you've done well to get it to this point. So thank you. There are three recommendations to conduct further due diligence in relation to the JV that you mentioned with Places for People, to the final terms of the agreement to be delegated to the Director of Property and to the Cabinet Member, and then to approval to procure a full tender process and so on. So are those three recommendations agreed? Agreed. Thank you very much. So we'll now move on to item 9, which is a paper relating to the community recycling centres and an update on the waste strategy. Mike.
Thank you, Leader. This Cabinet report brings together the strategy for the CRCs and confirms that a wider, more detailed strategy will be brought to Cabinet next year to take into account the new government resource in waste strategy. This will set out how we are going to reduce waste, increase recycling and reused, invest in infrastructure and reaffirm even better working relationships with our partners, district and boroughs. This report very much focuses on the CRCs and takes into account the recommendations made in Andrew Povey's paper on Annex 1. Waste management is a complicated business, and this paper tells a story that I hope residents can understand. There are a total of 11 recommendations. These recommendations centre on reducing waste from residents, increasing recycling and reuse through a residents' campaign. I am recommending that there should be no CRC closures, that we should undertake a review of the opening hours, and that we should not introduce charges for wood. In addition, I am recommending a review of our reuse shops, investment in ANPR cameras in a number of sites. That would see us boost our efforts to decrease waste volumes and increase recycling and reused. Helping to improve our messages to our residents so that they are aware of exactly what they can recycle is important. And what we've been working on this last few weeks is a different messaging campaign. And I'm just going to show Cabinet now what that message is. Now, this will go out to the public over the course of this week and next week. This is the first draft of it. There's a little bit tightening we want to do, but I thought Cabinet and the public would like to see what we've produced so far. Where's the picture? There's no picture. There's no picture. Where's... Well, no. Right, start at the beginning. Well, I hope just think it's just a different way of getting a message across. We have been criticised in the past that people don't understand. This is going to be a series of videos that we're going to do to also explain curbside collection as well. I think it's just doing it differently to try and get that message, and I'm sure you all enjoyed it. I will move on. At the 29th January Cabinet meeting, a number of recommendations were discussed, and paragraphs 2 and 3 list these recommendations that were deferred. In addition, the Cabinet recommended the establishment of a task group to consider the CRCs and the whole waste strategy. A summary of actions from Andrew Povey's report is included in Annex 1, as I've said. I would like to take this opportunity to thank Andrew and the task group for their valuable contribution to the waste strategy. And I would also like to take this opportunity of thanking the Scrutiny Committee, who also helped to shape this report. Since we started to make changes to the way our CRCs are operated, in September 2015, we have seen a 37% reduction in waste tonnages going into our CRCs. There are a variety of reasons for this. We have better controls on our waste coming into the CRCs to exclude traders and businesses from disposing of their waste at council taxpayers' expense, and the introduction of charges for construction waste in 2015 has reduced the amount of this type of waste that is being disposed of at our sites. We believe that residents are now using alternative commercial waste services, such as skips, to deal with their DIY waste when they have extensions, etc. We did consider the current charging of rubble, soil and plasterboard. There has been a significant shift in the tonnage, as I've said, and these items into the CRCs, and much of this was previously from businesses, and now are paying for their own disposal. If we were to stop the charging of these items, then this would cost Surrey County Council in excess of £2 million. But we will continue to work on this and look to see if we can find an opportunity in the future to reassess this. The government's waste resource strategy may give us that opportunity. A summary of the changes made to CRCs can be found in Annex 3, and points 8, 9 and 10 of the report highlight the new waste and resource consultation the government has launched last year, and potentially the implementation around 2022-23. It is unclear yet how these changes will be implemented, but without doubt this will be the biggest change in waste in a generation. In points 10 and 11 we highlight the ongoing impact of the Chinese government's Operation National Sword and the closure of other overseas markets, which has led to an oversupply of material and reduction in prices. As a result, we have now seen recycling material processing costs increase to £60 a tonne from only £40 or less than a year ago, putting serious financial pressures on the council's budget. But we currently continue to absorb these costs by making savings elsewhere within the waste strategy. Table 4 summarises the savings achieved from 2015-16 to date. It shows that we have achieved our savings that we required, but at the same time costs have increased in other areas, as I've just said. Most notably those for disposal of residue waste, which is now well over £120 per tonne. The savings achieved in the 4 CRCs where we accept recycling only are shown on Table 5. These savings have been achieved as a result of reduced tonnage, and point 25 shows that the saving is in excess of £200,000 plus labour cost savings. This will give us approximately a £300,000 saving in a full year. And interestingly, you've got the figures there for up to September, up to August, but September's shown a continual reduction in waste going into these 4 CRCs and into all our CRCs across Surrey. Points 26 and 27 cover our successful reuse shops, which last year diverted 800 tonnes of waste from disposal and generated £23,000 for local charities and delivered over £200,000 of income and savings for the council. One particular area of concern is that we are required to charge VAT on the grounds that is sold at the shops. And it's my intention to write to the government asking for the VAT element to be removed. The government, quite rightly, are encouraging councils to install reuse shops, and we are already there. But the requirement to charge VAT on sales of reusable items is a disincentive. Whilst I am pleased that our contract with Surrey has made good progress with our reuse shops, I still feel it is time now to relook at these, as suggested in Andrew Poe's report, and we will relook at these and the efficiencies in the coming 6 months. There has been some increases in fly tip, and I accept that. But however, if you look at 2015 level to 2019, there actually has been a slight decrease. But we launched a review of our policy last June with the police, and we still need to do more to tackle and enforce this illegal act. Can I finally take this opportunity to thank the team of officers who have put this important report together. It was not an easy report to put together, but I hope you all agree that we've actually told the story for the residents. Before I take the 11 recommendations, are there any questions people would like to ask me?
Okay, I think we've got a number of members of the Cabinet, and then we also have some members in the audience as well. So I didn't see whose hand went up first, but we'll go along this way, shall we?
Thank you, Chair. As a member of the task group, I have to say I never realised how interesting rubbish was. It was an excellent opportunity to find out many different things about what goes on with our waste recycling. And I think it's all of our responsibility, as Mike was saying, to change people's perceptions of not going to the tip or the dump, but they're going now to reuse, recycle, and to actually put something back into the community and help make our county a better place. So I was pleased to see that we're going to keep the CRCs open, and also pleased to see we're going to start to reinvent them and make them fun places to be.
Yes.
Yeah, right.
Well, we know the leader.
Well, yes, I'm a regular visitor to the recycling centres, and I've mentioned to you before about having coffee shops there,
yes.
And making a place to go for the afternoon. Colin Campbell.
I'm really just trying to imagine you were spending an afternoon in a CRC having coffee, but there we go. This has been an ongoing conversation about the CRCs since this was first raised. But I do believe this paper now shows this council's commitment to move forward and also to recycling. They're called CRCs for a reason, and that's just been alluded to. They are community recycling centres, not rubbish dumps or anything else. And I think this paper and what's in here really goes to support that work and the delivery of that. There's been a lot of talk recently about the environment, recycling, and what we all need to do to actually impact on that. But nobody ever said it was going to be easy. One of the conversations I've had with residents in my own patch recently, they all said, well, this recycling is hard work. No one said it was going to be easy, but actually we all need to commit to doing something. And I think this paper and what we're now, the direction of travel with our community recycling centres actually really puts into that. We need to put things in place to make people think about their waste differently, because actually the real impact from all of this will come from how our residents deal with their waste. And hopefully we can put the things in place, like what's going forward now, to actually make them think about it. So I'm happy to support this paper, and I'll do one last thing, is actually talk about the app, because actually the app is really important, and I've been doing a lot of local promotion on it. When you have that question about what can you recycle, there is an app which works for Surrey called Surrey Recycling. You can put your postcode in, does your own local area, and I advise people to use it because it does help and does give you clear, defined advice.
Thank you. Denise Thames-Stewart.
Thank you, Leader. I think this is a really good example of a really excellent piece of work, particularly by the task group, demonstrating that at Surrey County Council we are taking very considered decision-making It's based on extremely detailed work, and I think the overhead brought to life the quality of the staff and the fact that we are really investing in our recycling centres and wanting them to serve our residents. I think there was a presentation actually given by Jonathan Essex to a council meeting, and he mentioned about throwing things away, but where is away? And I think understanding that everything we actually dispose of has a cost, and that's our cost because it's our council tax. So I think this report is a really excellent report, and I think for us to all take collective responsibility and to follow your suggestion to reduce, reuse and recycle, and to be considered about everything that we use in regard to waste. I think it's an excellent report. Thank you.
Julia?
2 points of note, really. The reduced tonnage and the cost implications and the savings that has for Surrey County Council, so I'm very welcoming of that. And a suggestion for the leader's afternoon activities, actually, if he's visiting the recycling centre. Speaking as a former magistrate, I welcome the employment and training opportunities on the refurbishment of these bikes, and I know how much you like recycling, leader.
Well, thank you all very much for your suggestions. Zully.
Thank you. Yes, when we watched the video, I'm very pleased that Anne was standing and behind where she was standing, behind her, there were all these objects that have been rescued and were in the reuse shop. And the reuse shop in the Ellswood CRC, which is the one I use, and which I have to say is a pleasure to go to. I know one of our residents said it's joy, but the staff are incredibly helpful and they help you think. Is really something you want to throw away? Have you considered reusing or recycling? The reuse shop has been so successful that entire families, mum and dad and 2 children, are browsing which bike we're going to buy next. I mean, such is the good collection of bikes, for example. So I think this report is very, very encouraging that what our residents are doing so far has been great. The tonnage has been reduced. We are all becoming very conscious every time we pick the object as to what's the best thing to do with it. And if this encourages us to go even further, as we should do, then absolutely it's the right way to go. So all credit to those who compiled the report, because I think it is comprehensive about the cost of not doing and the benefits of doing. Thank you.
Have I missed anybody else? No. I mean, I think also, there's obviously the end recycling, but also there's the whole piece around lobbying industry. Anybody who watched breakfast television this morning may have seen a piece around coat hangers, plastic coat hangers, which are non-recyclable. And there was a proposal there is a new coat hanger being introduced. But I mean, there is still a lot in material that is non-recyclable in the system, and I think we need to all continue to put pressure on those responsible to address that. So,
did you say Andrew Povey wanted to?
Oh, sorry. Yes, yeah. We're just going to come on to that. I thought you were going to. Did you want to add anything else? No. Okay. All right. So, I've got two speakers down here. Four speakers by the look of it. 3 anyway. We'll take Becky Rush, then Hazel Watson, then Jonathan Essex. Andrew, did you want to say something as well? Okay, fine. Well, let's start with Becky then Hazel.
Thank you for allowing me to speak today, Chairman, on this agenda item, the Community Recycling Centres. As you all know, I'm the County Councillor for the Wallingham Division, and within which is the Wallingham CRC, which is also known as Bond Road. I'd like to extend my gratitude and that of my local residents to the Cabinet Member for the recommendation in the report today to keep Wallingham CRC open, and I hope it sounds like everybody's in support of that, so thank you. I don't need to tell you that the proposals in January were deeply unpopular, and the recycling-only trial is equally unpopular and met with a high degree of scepticism. There's been much local concern over what has been seen as ongoing erosion to waste services in the north-east corner of Surrey. Residents presented the petition last month, and the CRC is the issue that I received most correspondence about. Whilst I'm absolutely delighted that the CRC will be kept open, I would like to raise the issue of waste service erosion with you today. In short, the local residents and I would like to see a useful CRC with more services reinstated in Wallingham. Since April 2016, the waste services offered at Wallingham have been reducing through reduction of days, hours and types of waste accepted. Today, it is a recycling-only CRC, accepting many items which are collected by the excellent doorstep recycling service offered by Tandridge. The CRC, therefore, doesn't fill the hole in terms of waste disposal in the north of Tandridge. Being rural, wood waste is a huge issue for our area, and the CRC does not provide this facility, although wood can be recycled. The report indicates some reduction in the usage and tonnage at Wallingham CRC. However, I'm not sure that I can point to any particular strategies that have been that will have reduced the waste, apart from not accepting the black bin bags, which I wholeheartedly agree with. If you reduce the hours a CRC is open, then the footfall usage will decrease. And if you decrease the types of waste accepted, then the volume of waste will decrease. The question is, what we should all be asking is, where's this waste gone? And I don't believe that people are behaving any differently in today's disposable society at the moment. Many residents contact me because they've taken a carload up to the tip and returned with most of it in their boot. Their question to me is, what should I do with the brick, the wood, the paint, etc., which is no longer accepted? And when I reply that it's accepted at Redhill, I know myself that that's not a plausible and acceptable suggestion. The next nearest CRC to Wallingham is Caterham. It's also very small, and although it has a slightly better service offering, it is even more chaotic to access than Wallingham, being on a bus route next door to a doctor's surgery and also a school. Residents are directed to Redhill for a full CRC service, and that suggestion is not plausible. It's a 1-hour round trip on the M25 or A25. It's unrealistic to expect residents to make this journey to dispose of domestic waste. We're making the decision to deal responsibly with waste difficult for residents by putting up such time and distance barriers. And we want residents to take responsibility for their own waste. And the only way we can do that is to encourage them to reduce, reuse and recycle by providing CRCs that are fit for purpose and not limiting the offering that we take there. By giving residents access to all waste and recycling services on their doorstep, we're helping them to make a positive choice about how they deal with waste. I was disappointed to see a number of the smaller changes proposed in the task force paper have not been put forward as recommendations today. Some of these small projects, such as local composting centres, could help with the much needed behavioural change required. So in summary, I believe that our strapline should be that we're making it easier for residents of Surrey to dispose of their waste responsibly. Keeping Wallingham CRC is a vital and gratefully received step towards delivering this, and I and the local area really do appreciate that. However, I would really like to ask the Cabinet member if we can take a good look together at how we reinstate some of the other vital waste services in the north of Tandridge. What I would like to see is the full suite of waste services offered across the two small CRCs, Wallingham and Caterham, treat them as one combined site. Stop the recycling-only trial. These CRCs don't need to duplicate the doorstep recycling offered, and this would free up vital space for other waste services. The two CRCs, Wallingham and Caterham, are within 2 miles of each other. They also don't need to duplicate their offerings. They should have complementary services, wood at one and rubble at the other, hard plastic at one and mattresses at the other, for example. This would give North Tandridge residents the best opportunity to deal with their waste responsibly, and it would ease the congestion across the two sites, and that is until a purpose-built facility is built which would alleviate all these issues. I would be delighted to support the Cabinet member in examining and implementing this combined approach and in communicating this locally. Thank you for listening to me today.
Thank you very much. Do you want to take all the questions in one go? Yeah? Okay. Mrs. Watson.
Thank you for allowing me to speak on the subject. I'm Hazel Watson, I'm the County Councillor for Dorking Hills, and the Dorking CRC is within my county division. I'm delighted that the importance of the Dorking tip is now recognised by the County Council and that it is to be retained. The petition the Liberal Democrats delivered to County Hall at the beginning of the year opposing its closure, along with the objections of many local residents, has clearly had an influence on the County Council. But the Dorking tip really needs to be open for 7 days per week and to accept a wide range of waste so that residents can dispose of their waste in one trip locally. Furthermore, since the Dorking tip was restricted to taking only recyclable material, residents with a mixed bag of materials have been frustrated by the tip only taking some of their items and then having to travel to the Leatherhead tip to dispose of the rest. This is unreasonable. Residents from Dorking and Southern Mole Valley should not have to drive miles to the Leatherhead tip to dispose of their black bag waste. A local tip is an essential service, and the County Council should be making it easy for residents to dispose of their waste responsibly, not more difficult. It is excellent news that the tip is to be kept open, and we now have to press for it to reopen 7 days a week and to accept black bag waste. Many thanks.
Thank you very much. Jonathan Essex.
Thank you for letting me speak as a member of this task group, or should I say CRC, or Community Recycling Centre Task Group, and I should declare an interest as a trustee of Furnace Store in Red Hill. I think it's excellent news that CRCs are staying open, and I would just like to affirm how hard it is to restart something after you've stopped it than to keep it going. And I think it's really important that these good services which we have, we continue to have, and we make better, and we can build on that. And I thank you also for your report, which in the introduction talks about how this links to the climate emergency challenge in Surrey. This council sees that the call to reduce, reuse, recycle and shift to a circular economy is part of how we need to transform how we live across Surrey. But that means that the collection of these for recycling is only the first bit. We need to make sure that they don't end up at the far side of the world and not being recycled, but we make good use of them here. So I look forward to us, for example, bringing forward our own MRF, another acronym, Material Recovery Facility, so that we can separate out the recycling into different things to make sure we sell it for higher value. And if we own that value, we can make sure that this really is beneficial, not just the council, but the taxpayers as well. I would note that the report in paragraph 34 refers half of the recommendations to a future strategy coming forward in 2020, and would like assurance, please, that this will consider the full body of the task report, not just the summary recommendations here. I think, as both Becky and Hazel have said, it's important that we don't just continue what we've got in a better way, but if we are to transform our county and deliver the climate emergency, we really need to transform how we move from a wasteful society that lives as if we have 3 planets to one where we live within our planet's limits. So to scale up reuse. So, for example, the task group report found that in visiting the CRCs, when the white goods are brought along, many are still functioning cookers. Many are still functioning fridges and TVs, but they are all recycled. That means they are still thrown away, mashed up, and just recovered for the metal content which they have. Whereas a question at those CRCs, is this still in working condition, would mean those could be diverted. Those could be diverted to homes and families that need these goods, that maybe cannot afford to provide them at the moment. Similarly, community composting, there's an opportunity to scale up that across Surrey. It would mean that we wouldn't score as high on our reported recycling levels, because when we collect it, rather than residents compost it, this counts as our recycling figures. So maybe we need to go back to government and say, well, actually, community composting should count in our recycling target, because currently there's a perverse incentive away from us doing the right thing. And I'd like to comment briefly, if I may, on recommendation 5. That seeks assurance that value for money is considered when we review the reuse at the CRCs. And I would just like assurance that we consider value for money in all the different kinds of value that happen. One value is how much money we have to pay for sewers for that waste, to avoid paying the higher charge of sending it to landfill. But I would just give the example of Furnace Store. When we reuse something locally, we get £63 a tonne from the County Council as a recycling credit when something's reused. But the bigger value is not just that diversion of the waste to landfill, but providing that free of charge to women coming out of a women's refuge, or people moving into a void in a social housing tenancy after being made homeless, or people on benefits able to afford subsidised stuff at a half normal rate, but also the passage of people back into work that these kind of enterprises say. So I really hope that next year you take on the second half of the recommendations as part of the waste review, and that we really see the scaling up of this taking place as like a second stage review of the CRCs. But I would leave you with one word, which is co-benefits. I think as long as we look at waste in one little pot, social value in another little pot, we're not going to really deliver the transformative change that the climate emergency points towards. So I hope that you might consider that when you come back on to this again next year.
Excellent. Thank you all very much. Mike Goodman.
I'll endeavour to cover it. So first of all, from the Cabinet, thank you for the comments. I agree with you. I think it was a well-written paper by the officers, and I take the point that perhaps I didn't stress, but also the county members did. This is also about the environmental benefits for Surrey as well, and that's really important. One thing I did not mention was in the report, there is an issue at the moment of accepting waste on the borders in West Sussex. I can just update Cabinet. I apologise, I should have said it before, but we are in the throes of hopefully confirm with them how we could deal with it. And they're very positive yesterday, today, so I hope to make an announcement early next week on that. I just want to take Colin's point, because he is absolutely right. They're not tips. They are recycling centres. And I think that that's what has happened, is that many people over the years just take all the rubbish there and don't segregate it. And what we're now seeing with the 4 recycling centres that are purely recycling is that the residue waste is 0, and that residue waste is not coming up anywhere else. There was 1,000 tonnes of less residue waste that went into the CRCs during the course of the last few months. And that is good news for the environment, to take Jonathan's point. So we must continue to work at reducing waste and increasing recycling and reused. Look, going on to Becky's comment. Becky, I totally agree with you. We are looking with Tandridge now. We do, and Colin's been involved in this, looking for another place for a recycling centre. It is needed. It is really needed. Yes, we would like to be able to charge at both the bond and catering, but unfortunately there is not the room to do it at bond. But I am pleased we put the wood back. But what I will do, I'll arrange for Richard and myself to spend a half a day with you, and we'll just show you the issues, and you show us what we could do, and if there are things we can work on, we most certainly will, and I'll give you my assurances for that. Hazel, I think that it is true to say, I'm not playing politics here, but I think it was many people who petitioned me, totally non-political. Many people rang me up, sent me emails, and that's why we did not, after speaking to the leader in January, implement the closures of the CRCs then. We wanted time to think about it, and that's why we asked Andrew to look at this. So I think it was a team effort between the whole of us in coming back to the right decision not to close these CRCs. But please, I would appreciate, it is not a tip. It is a community recycling centre. As for opening 7 days, I'm not going to make any promises there. What I have said in the paper, we're going to look at all the opening hours to see where there is a need. And we have already opened, or we were about to open, Leatherhead, because there was an issue of Leatherhead being closed when Dorking was, and that's being taken care of. Jonathan, you do set me a few targets there. I agree with you. We do need a material recovery facility, and there is plans to build one, but we've got to get the right location for it, because that would help us to get better value out of our recycling. What I have already written to Andrew and Jonathan Riley is that whether they would help us once we start to shape the strategy going forward for waste, whether they will come and help us be involved in that, and Andrew is going to continue doing that work, and I think that's really important. Look, I accept there are also some things we've not taken on now, but there's no reason why they cannot continue to be looked at. So today isn't saying no to all the other things that were said by the task group, but we've picked out the priorities and we've delivered those today. But it is not a closed door, because I take the point that you said, Jonathan, we do need to do more and more on the environmental side. But I do want to close one thing with the reuse shops. And I was fascinated with what Julie said about Tim in repairing the bikes, because I'm not sure if the leader is aware, but the people that repair the bikes at the moment for our CRCs are from Her Majesty's Service. It goes to the prison. So if you would like to repair some of those bikes, our prison service helps repair those bikes, and then they go out and they are sold. In fact, we have people that were involved in that in the prison, came then eventually to work for Surrey. So it's a really good initiative they've got. As for giving stuff away to families, Surrey's already do that. In the Leatherhead site, often they're given furniture for people with needs. These were refugees. When I was across there a few months ago, they were telling me people come there and need help, so therefore we give them that free of charge, so we do not charge them for that. I think it's a great initiative. Perhaps we could do more of it, and I'll take that on board. But I do think this is a comprehensive report that I hope our residents will support, and I also Cabinet. And I turn you to the 11 recommendations, Leader, on page 58 and 59.
Indeed, thank you. Can I add my thanks to the task group led by Andrew Povey and the work of the Select Committee was really useful. As Mike says, this isn't the end of that conversation. We're pleased that we can move forward in terms of the recommendations that are here, and that work will continue over the coming months. So on that basis, there are 11 recommendations which I don't intend to read out, but if you're happy with those, could you please indicate? Thank you very much. Okay, so the next item then on the agenda is the organisation strategy for 2020 to 2024 and the next phase of transformation. This paper builds on the work that we did last year in relation to the organisation strategy. It's about partnership working. It's about delivering better outcomes for our residents and indeed for our own staff here. I believe that we've made significant progress in improving service performance, and we've stabilised our finances. And as I said earlier, that's against the background of rising demand and continuing pressure on resources. Just to remind you, we spend £1 million a day on delivering services to our adult and vulnerable residents, and £500,000 a day for those children that have special needs. So the organisation strategy, this paper, is closely aligned with the work that we have done around the health and wellbeing strategy, the 10-year plan that we produced fairly recently. And there are sort of two key themes that run through both the Surrey Heartlands and health and wellbeing strategy and the work of this council. And that is a focus on improving the quality of life for our residents, genuinely trying to improve the quality of life, and in particular addressing the inequality of life expectancy. I've said this now many times, that in truth the public perception is that Surrey is a very wealthy and leafy and green county, and in many respects and in many areas it is, but equally there are significant pockets of deprivation, and life expectancy varies enormously across the county, and indeed even within a particular district or borough. So what we want to do, or what our intention, our ambition is to create a county that everybody wants to live in and can live in and work in. So the refresh strategy focuses on a number of key areas, and one of the appendices you'll see the eight areas that we will be focusing on. So that is tackling inequality, as I said, and particularly around life expectancy. It's supporting independence, in the paper that Sinead went through with us earlier is about helping residents, not just in terms of providing accommodation with support, but also helping residents to engage in their own communities. More joined-up health and social care. A key part of our strategy is to integrate more closely with the health service. It is the same resident that is the same patient, and by working closely together, we can absolutely maximise the resource and improve outcomes at a much greater pace. The greener future, we spent a long time talking about recycling. That's one aspect of the greener future and the climate change and creating a carbon-free county. There is a lot of work that is being done and has been done by the Environment Commission that we set up, and that will be reporting back shortly. A really good engagement with local communities, 10 good ideas of things that we can do with them. Either some of those are very local to those areas, but some of those we can roll out across the county, and we'll be looking at that in the not too distant future. The fifth one is about embracing the diversity. I mean, we do not have, certainly in this authority, a sufficiently diverse workforce, and we need to find ways of addressing that. And partnership, we have a role. We are part of the system. We have our own responsibilities, but equally we need the help and support of other partner agencies and businesses, and indeed our residents. We need to do this together. And then the last two are supporting the local economy. Again, a piece of work is underway to look at the infrastructure that we need within this county. So what roads do we need, what rail links, and so on, to make the county more accessible, to address some of the congestion issues, which of course have a massive impact on air pollution, and so on. So we need to find ways that people can travel around the county, but equally within this organisation we are very focused on rolling out agile working, so that people can work more locally and not have to perhaps travel so far. So, and then the last one is the digital revolution. It is about using technology to its best advantage, and that is will always be a never-ending piece of work. But there are certain things we can do and will do to help engage residents more actively. And underpinning all of that is our key ambition, which is to make sure that no one is left behind. So this paper starts to explain some of that, or update residents on where we're at. And also if you look at the appendices, you'll see the impact statement, things that we have done, things that we say we're going to do. We will talk about flooding in a minute, which had a massive impact for many of our residents here, and the steps we're taking to address that. We will be investing more money into our roads, and more particularly into our pavements. We repaired in the last year some 50,000 potholes. I hope that residents will have seen, though, over the last 12 months, a number of roads improving, whether it's through surface dressing or resurfacing. 3,000 miles is a lot of road to keep in good shape. I appreciate the frustration that residents have, but I hope you will start to see genuine improvement on that. The climate emergency, I made it very clear when we declared that emergency, it was on the basis that we as a county would identify things that we could do, or we could do in partnership with others. It wasn't just to be a pointless declaration. It was to galvanise some activity and some action, and that is exactly what it is doing. And then there are a couple of other things. The planting of the trees, which I think has caught the public's imagination. We will be planting a tree for every resident in this county, which currently is just under 1.2 million. And rising, but we will do that, and of course that's beneficial in terms of the pollution and so on. And then, and I think Mary Lewis mentioned it earlier. Our offer to the voluntary and the charitable sector to share some of our space where they can do, where it's appropriate. This is a public authority. The buildings are owned by the public and are for the use of the public, and where we can assist local organisations by providing them with some accommodation, even if it's on a temporary basis, then I believe that is exactly what we should be doing. So there are a number of things here. So I would encourage you to read the impact statement and the short document which sets out our focus over the next few years. It will be continually updated, but I hope the paper gives you a very clear sense of direction of travel. And indeed, as we move forward in terms of improving our financial position, as I said earlier, we can then start to focus on some choices, and I'm sure members will be delighted when they are given those choices to assess. So, very happy to yes, I think just the other point I would make in terms of residents, which we've touched on in the context of recycling, but I think it's also the health agenda is hugely important here. As an organisation, and particularly in our children's services and adult services, very real focus on preventing things from happening, preventing people falling into chronic conditions, and so identifying those needs at a much earlier stage, and where appropriate to intervene at an earlier stage. There is, at the moment, that hasn't always been the case, and people then fall into some sort of chronic condition which is not good for them and the long-term outcome, and indeed it's not good in terms of the financial cost of supporting that individual. So, so I think the residents, we need to help them make it easier to get on their bikes. I'm not offering a repair service, but to get on their bike and to walk. I think the average distance that people drive is about 1.2 miles. It's very short. How can we get people out of their cars and into either public transport or shared transport or walking or cycling and so on? And we will do a lot in terms of getting that message out there, and indeed doing the bits that we need to do, whether that's improving pavements and so on, to help facilitate that. So I think let's make sure that our residents help us to help themselves in many respects. This is all about good things that we're doing. There are a lot of positive papers here today. We're actually starting to see things being delivered, which is exactly what we would want to do. So now, are there any questions or observations in relation to this comment?
Thank you, Leader. It's quite interesting this, because although any paper that you bring forward is really interesting, I think this really comes to life in the annexes, because I think that it really starts to bring the detail out. We often get criticised about bringing one sentences with some, what does it mean under the surface. This really starts to scratch the surface and see what's underneath. The organisational strategy 2020 to 2025 starts to give some detail around that. Understanding the partnership working, and I think the partnership working is such a big word, because actually it is everybody, it is businesses, it is residents, it is everybody, boroughs and districts. There's a lot of people involved in that, and we've already touched on that with the CRCs in working with our residents and us empowering. I think this is a great paper. It's a great first step. There's still lots of work to do, but I think this really now starts to bring to life what we are trying to achieve. And actually, I know and can assure people that our commitment to this is absolutely 110%. So really great, this paper, really good. The annex, but I do advise people to read the annexes, because they do make a lot of sense and start to help people to understand what we're trying to achieve.
Thank you. Okay. What? It's not criticising, it's supporting. Zully.
Thank you. I don't have a recollection of a paper similar to this before, and I've served in this authority for 10 years. I think this allows our residents a very good insight on what we have been doing this last year, because we have been doing so much that sometimes I'm sure not everybody's keeping tabs with everything. So, and the second thing is that particularly the list that you elaborated on, it tells our residents how we expect them to be part of this journey. And I think that's terribly important. And the word partnership is very, very loaded in everybody's minds. It could mean different things to different people at different times. But I think this spells out that it's not just about working with other local authorities. It's not just about working with the NHS. Yes, it is about that. But it's also about our residents and their needs and our focus on that. And I don't think we have done a paper that was so comprehensive in that respect before, and I very much welcome it, and I agree with Colin that I would certainly recommend to my residents that they don't miss the annex. Absolutely. Thank you.
Okay, and I think I should pay tribute to Joanna Killian as Chief Executive and the Executive Directors here, because it's not for writing the paper, but for what has gone into this piece of work and driving this whole agenda. I mean, from April last year, probably, I think would be the sort of time we would date it from. The last 18 months has been relentless in terms of the focus on what we can do and how we can do things better, and that's different ways of delivering services and getting the buy-in and engagement from all of the organisations that sit around this organisation is no mean feat. And I think I would genuinely pay tribute to you for having driven that hard and for getting us to this point, and look forward to those continued efforts. Right, so we'll now move on to actually what is probably the most significant report that this council has seen for some time, and that relates to... Oh, sorry, yes, I got overly excited there. I'm assuming that the recommendations, of which there is one, is agreed. Is it agreed? Thank you very much. So, the next item then relates to the Surrey Flood Alleviation Scheme. This is primarily focused on protecting residents' properties that are potentially at risk of flooding. But indeed, it also then opens up all sorts of other opportunities to improve and enhance communities along the river corridor. There's an opportunity to create new habitats, to improve the existing landscape, to create new country parks, again, to contribute to the health and well-being strategy in terms of accessibility to open spaces, and indeed, probably to increase tourism and recreation and leisure. It will include the creation of new cycle paths and footpaths, new footbridges across the floodplain channels, and potentially a new eco community, which would include both housing and employment opportunities. So it's a major piece of work in all senses. I don't know whether we've got the map here. In the papers you'll see the map which identifies the communities at high risk of flooding, which is the little circles, but then the other areas that are potentially at risk. And it's quite a scary picture when you see just how much of this county is at risk. This scheme started, in fairness, focused on the River Thames and the properties along the River Thames, particularly in Spelthorne, Runnymede, and to a lesser extent in Elmbridge, but has been extended out now to look at all of the waterways across the whole of the county. It is a significant financial undertaking. We will need to borrow to fund this scheme, but at the end of the day, looking at what happened in 2014, which is where I think these pictures come from, nobody wants to see a repetition of that. This county had flooding in 2000, 2003, 2007, 2014. So we have to and will address that. It will be done in conjunction with a number of other organisations, particularly the Environment Agency and the Royal Borough of Windsor and Maidenhead, which is a significant financial contributor, along with some of our district and borough authorities here. But it will also include Kingston, Richmond, Thames Water, Homes England, the Local Enterprise Partnership, and so on. So what part of this paper deals with is the governance arrangements around this. So effectively, the County Council will be the lead authority and will coordinate activity and oversee activity not only of the Environment Agency but all the other authorities that have an involvement in it. And there's some technicalities in terms of the various bodies that will be set up to do that. But this is a lot of our residents' money that is being committed to this scheme, and we must therefore make sure that we're clear at all times on how it is progressing. And that will come back to Cabinet in the early part of next year, I think, for sign-off. So what is this scheme going to do? It's going to focus on maintaining the existing water courses and the drainage systems. It will invest in natural and engineered flood alleviation schemes. It will look to influence planning decisions. We are only a minor planning authority. Most planning is dealt with by the district and borough authorities, and a significant housing estate has an impact on water runoff and so on. So we will look to influence that and other critical policies and find ways to support residents to be more resilient. So it's going to be challenging to get this completely funded and also from a technical perspective. The paper sets out a number of issues, but including the improved maintenance regime. We will define the responsibilities of each of the authorities. We are at times criticised for not taking responsibility or for individual things. Often it isn't actually the responsibility of this authority, it's somebody else's. But we need to make sure that we're very clear on what we will be delivering and what we expect others to be delivered. We also need to engage with private owners who have various riparian rights. We need to make sure that they do what they need to do on their own land, and we will be looking at enforcement processes and procedures in the event that they don't. We will look to make sure that flooding is addressed in any major planning application, that point is picked up. And we will be looking at a capital programme with other risk management authorities. So there's a lot of things that are going to happen to deliver this. But I really think and I really hope that the residents you can see the benefits of this, particularly those that are at high risk. I mean, I think there were 1,200 houses were flooded internally in 2013-14. I think the damage cost was something like £27 million. And that doesn't even touch the impact that it had on those families and their lives. So it is a big commitment. We will borrow this money over a period of time, and we will continue to work with other partner organisations and also businesses. I mean, there will be significant economic benefit to the larger employers in this county if this scheme, or when this scheme is completed. So we will need to have further conversations with them. But there are a number of recommendations here which we will come back to. But I'm sure some of you want to comment. Colin, start with you.
Thank you, Leader. And before I say what I was going to say, quite interesting looking at the pictures you've got up, because it does show that although we've been driving this forward to look at ways of bringing money into it, we haven't been sitting still. And actually 2 or 3 of those pictures are of a scheme that's just been installed. There it is. That's Godalming to help, and that's a partnership work between Environment Agency, local council, The MP's been involved, and we opened that only 2 or 3 weeks ago, and it's a great scheme there to protect local homes, which is a success story, and it shows what can be done. We all work together, and I think that's a sign of what can be delivered. But I totally support this paper, even though the larger percentage of this is on the River Thames scheme, but the impact of even that will be felt across a lot of North Surrey by the people and businesses that are alongside the River Thames, but it's the rivers that flow into it as well. So I think there is a wider benefit in just that scheme. But also there is a lot of work that will be done across the rest of Surrey to protect people's homes and the businesses. And looking at Annex 1, which you've already addressed, again, referring to the annexes like I did on your previous paper, really starts to show a picture about where the risks are in Surrey. There's no magic cure. It's not going to absolutely make all the risks go away, but it's going to make a lot of difference to people's lives and the local economy. Even if our memory of 2013 and 14 has faded a little bit, and these pictures will bring some of that back, there are still residents which have not returned to their homes. You know, the bills for that incident are massive, and we need to address some of those issues. And even looking at the news over the last few days, look at what's happened in the north of England. It happens quite quickly, without warning. There's been a lot of work done by officers and politically to get the government and other organisations to bridge the funding gap. A lot of them are paying towards it, the government including, and the Environment Agency, but there's been a big funding gap for a while. And I think the time has come for us to step up to the plate and put measures in place to protect our residents, our businesses and our economy here in Surrey. And this paper starts that piece of work. Really pleased to support this, and really pleased we are now moving forward with getting these schemes across the whole of Surrey delivered.
Denise.
Thank you. Well, I'd certainly like to support this report. I think it's a very bold and visionary report. It supports the organisational strategy, investing in infrastructure that Surrey needs to build strong and resilient communities. I think it's important to note that I think the Lower Thames scheme has been on the table for about 10 years now. And I certainly remember the Environment Agency visiting Surrey and lobbying many years ago, asking for funding. So I think the fact that we're taking responsibility and taking the lead, and as Colin says, stepping up. Currently, in a lot of the locations which are illustrated in these pictures, there are temporary flood defences, and that is all we have to protect our properties at the moment. So actually recognising the need to protect our infrastructure, to protect our residents, and prevent these devastating events from happening to this extent in the future, I think this is absolutely the right thing to do. A very significant investment, but absolutely the right thing to do.
Mark.
Thank you, Leader. On behalf of the people of Church that I represent, and Runnymede especially, after many years of indecision, it's with great pleasure that it's Surrey County Council that steps forward and takes the responsibility to make this scheme happen. Denise is right, this has been many, many years in the planning, and I think people on the ground really didn't think this was going to happen. So this is fantastic news going forward. We suffered a lot with the flooding, and it's not just when the flooding happens. As Colin said, it's many, many years after that people suffer and feel the effects of the flooding. So although this is going to take its time to be built, this will have far-reaching benefits right across the county. So it's fantastic news, and I'm so pleased to be a part of the council that's going to take this forward and protect our residents.
Thank you. Mary, then Mike.
Thank you, Leader. I just wanted to, I agree with the comments made by my colleagues, and we focused a lot on what we're doing as a county council, which obviously is what we're here to decide about today. But I want to sort of point out that there's still quite a big role for our residents and also for private landowners to support this. I mean, the county council stepping up to the plate, but local people still have to help us to get this right, because if they don't, if private landowners don't meet their own riparian responsibilities, or if local people do things, even like in my division we've had things like concreting in ditches outside people's properties without any thought about where the water was supposed to be flowing from and to through those ditches. People concreting over huge areas of their gardens which actually could help to absorb water. So as in what we were saying about recycling, reusing, all that sort of thing, and reducing waste, residents and private landowners also have to take their responsibilities, because some of the localised flooding can be ameliorated with very simple local solutions, and we're relying on people to play their part too.
Mike?
Yes, I'll be very brief. First of all, I'd like to associate myself with all the comments made so far and your comments as well, Leader. I think this is a really exciting project. And I've only been on the council for a few years, but I don't remember £270 million being assigned as a capital investment before. I think this is really good. I think it's brave. I think it just also shows what you said in the opening address, Leader, that our financial situation has improved with some really good work that we've done over the last 2 years. I also think that this links in to the previous item that you introduced, which is making Surrey a safe place, because there's no doubt flooding does make us unsafe for those people that are affected. So I think we welcome that. I think that there is a danger that you would think this is all about River Thames, but as you quite rightly said, this has got a lot more than just the River Thames. This is right across Surrey, and I think the challenge for us as a council is to ensure that Doug and his team do have the right help with putting together these schemes that we want to deliver in the coming years. And I think the other thing it links to is you talked about natural flood measures. Trees are a natural thing to use to reduce flooding, and in the tree strategy that we're putting together as a consultation later this year, one of the big sections that Doug is writing for us is how we can use trees within Surrey to stop flooding or to reduce flooding. I think this is a fabulous item, and fully support it, and I'm sure all our residents will as well.
Thank you. Alison?
2014 was a very exciting time for me. This is how I actually became a councillor. We flooded in Sunbury, and I trained up for first responder teams. And I just want to say, the voluntary sector was a very big part in this as well, and I know that my residents will be extremely pleased that they're going to feel listened to. I've been to a lot of these meetings, and at times I wondered if it would actually come through, and I'm just so excited and just want to thank you, and I'm really happy to be part of this plan which will protect our residents in the future, because we know this will happen again. And it's just great to know that we're actually taking steps to alleviate this, so thank you.
Well, we have a happy cabinet. That rarely happens. Okay, so I think there are 3 recommendations. Yeah, those agreed? Agreed. Thank you very much. Right, I don't think we can promise you the same level of excitement for the next item on the agenda. Item 12, the Digital Business and Insights Programme Outline Business Case. Zully.
Thank you, Leader. No, I'm completely with you on this one. This is a somewhat technical paper, as members would have had opportunity to see when they read it. It's presenting the outline business case for progressing the procurement activities to upgrade and replace our existing corporate system, that is that Enterprise Resource Planning System, or ERP as you might know it. And this is the system that we use to manage all our business critical activity in finance, HR, payroll and procurement. Therefore it is a very important system, even though the paper in itself is rather boring. The reason why we have to look at this today is our current SAP system. The support for it expires in 2025. In addition, we currently host the software in-house, so we have a dedicated server which is experiencing performance issues due to its age, which will be expensive if we were to extend support for it. A new system will also improve our management decision making and help us, very importantly, to achieve our transformation ambitions and to have a flexible and mobile workforce. So those are the reasons why in front of you you have a recommendation today for to proceed to the procurement activities, and the recommendation is for a software as service model. So this will be a new model, and in paragraph 15 of the report you will have seen there is a detailed analysis of the options that have been considered, and so you are also asked to approve funding to allow us to have resources on this programme to move on. The further details on the financials are in part 2 of the document. So I'm happy to take any questions. Is there any? Thank you.
Thank you, Celine. As you say, I think it's pretty straightforward. It's something we need to do. So, yeah, unless anybody's going to come and say, there are 3 recommendations. Are those agreed? Agreed. Thank you very much. Item 13 then is the financial monitoring report. Just in the absence of Mel Few, I'll briefly introduce it. Just to remind you, we set ourselves a target of efficiencies of 200 million over the last 2 years, and we're 18 months into that, and we are currently 7.8 million off that target. That number has been coming down, and I'm hopeful, if not confident, that by the end of this month that gap will have closed even further. So that will enable us, of course, then to deliver again a balanced budget with no call on our limited resources. So again, we know we need to retain, and absolutely will retain, the focus on delivering those plans. The second point is that the capital budget has been reviewed for this year and has reduced from 129 million to 122 million. In the November budget statement, we will be talking at some length, actually, around the capital budget and the projects that we will be looking to hopefully fund going forward. Some of the things is around timing issues, which is clear from the paper, and then the only other point just to highlight is that the Surrey Hills Primary School is converting to an academy, and as is the norm, they take with them the surplus of 38,000. Mark, were you going to add any comments?
Well, I think you've summarised that very well, Leader. Mel said I wouldn't have to say too much because everyone reads the papers so diligently. No, I think, as you've said, there is a slight shortfall at the moment on the saving, but that's already 1.2 million better than it was last month, so we're moving in the right direction. It is slow, but I think we're on top of it and we're moving in the right direction. So month on month, hopefully you'll see improvements in that respect.
Mel, if you're watching from Australia, we're about to, I think, just note your report. I don't think we need to do any more than that, so that is noted. Thank you very much. And that brings us to the end. Oh, sorry, yes, you're right, thank you. Yes, so the recommendation, 2 recommendations actually, yes. One is to approve the conversion and the revenue surplus to be transferred to the new academy, and the other is to note the forecast. Is that agreed? Thank you very much. So I now need to read out to you, mainly for Rebecca's benefit, under Section 100A of the Local Government Act 1972. I'm afraid the public will now be excluded.